Hello everyone and Merry Christmas. I hope you're all feeling festive with your family and friends. That's the first time you'll have ever heard me say that, and I hope it won't be the last, because 2017 was the year my channel started. Officially, that is. It was this time last year that I decided to make it. I was on YouTube and I found Joseph Anderson's The Witness video show up in my recommended tab over and over. I was intrigued by its length, so I watched it. At the time, I was planning on starting a YouTube channel. Well, one that didn't suck at least. So as soon as I finished Joseph's video, I knew I wanted to make my content like his. Straight away I got to work on my first script on The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, and then Skyward Sword, and then Prototype, and then about 10 other games all the way up until June when I was finally confident enough in my script to make it into a video. The Ringed City Critique. By Crisis 1 I was propelled past the 1000 subscriber mark along with Need for Speed Payback. I feel like I met my growth goal for the year there, but that was in mid-November. Now I'm at 2,800 subs, 120,000 views, and I couldn't be more thankful for it. But that's enough about this channel. I'm now going to do an awards thing of sorts based on totally arbitrary categories that I will most likely regret making next year. But first, I'm going to go through a few disclaimers, the first of which is that I barely played anything this year. Breath of the Wild, Persona, Nier, Origins, Wolfenstein 2, Odyssey, the list goes on. It's just a matter of money and time. But with that said, I hope this list won't be overly lacking thanks to the rule I have allowing me to occasionally pick anything that came out late last year. The majority of games I played this year were released then, and I don't think it's unreasonable because the vast majority of playtime on those games will have been logged in 2017. So, let's begin. This is 2017, the year of the fucking loot box, so where else to start but with the shadiest, most manipulative scumbag move of the year award. Middle-earth Shadow of War's loot crates. Thanks for ruining the sales and reception of one of the best sequels, one of the best Lord of the Rings games, and one of, if not the best, badass action games ever made. Shadow of War was absolutely excellent, and I do think it would be a game of the year pick all around were it not for these goddamn loot crates. It's a monumental shame. Need for Speed Payback's microtransaction innovation. Need for Speed Payback themed its entire story and progression systems around gambling. It glorified it. And it also happened to be the first game in the series with non-cosmetic microtransactions. Coincidence? No, of course not. Doesn't that make Payback the first game in history to go so far to manipulate you that it would actually change its entire story and game systems to do so? You can check out my review to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. I'm shocked that this game got so little press coverage. It's lucky that relatively no one cares about racing games anymore. Star Wars Battlefront 2, EA's second fuck-up of the year. Do I need to explain this one? They put a freemium economy in a fully priced game, which went so far it actually managed to get multiple governments investigating. Good job, guys. Call of Duty World War II. Thanks for disrespecting the thousands of soldiers who died in World War II by depicting them waiting in their bases opening fucking loot crates. What an embarrassment. UFC 3. It's an EA sports game but with emphasis on the EA. You need loot boxes to upgrade your punches based on a 5-star system. I'm not kidding. Destiny 2's reviewer manipulation. Basically, Destiny 2 totally ruined the progression and focused all of the worthwhile content around the first 6 hours or so. To A, please the hyper-casual audience, and to B, trick reviewers into believing the game was worth its weight in shit. It's a lie. The game was showered in 8s, 9s, 7s, and repeatedly said that it was better than Destiny 1 in almost every way. I guarantee you that anyone who wrote one of those reviews hadn't put in more than 15 hours, because the very notion that Destiny 2 is better than the first in any way but graphics and maybe Crucible balancing is hilarious to me. You can check out my critique of the game for the full explanation. You know there's something malign at play when a game whose entire community is currently in open rebellion still manages to get glowing reviews on launch. Destiny 2's Eververse store. Eververse, putting every single cosmetic item worth a damn behind a dumbass paywall or an insurmountable, totally unpredictable grind. And also destroying the hopes and dreams players had for an exotic vehicle after the Dawn Chaser Sparrow tease from the first game, and also for ruining the shader system. Did I mention that 50% of the new items in the Curse of Osiris DLC are Eververse only? Oh, and the Christmas Dawning event revolves entirely around manipulating you into buying Dawning engrams for silver. Fuck you, Tess. Destiny 2's Curse of Osiris DLC. You know, I would have made a video on this were it not for the price tag. But oh man, 20 euros for 8 rubbish missions, an awfully designed tileset system, a tiny explorable space, a broken PvP, 50% of items being locked to Eververse, and one interesting raid encounter. $20. Sure, The Dark Below was also $20 and released in 2014 and brought even less content, but we still brought it because we love Destiny. Myself and thousands of others adored the first game, though in admittance of how slimy the pricing was. Destiny 2, on the other hand, has a community decaying into a pool of hatred and contempt for Bungie, and that was before they asked their few remaining players to cough up a third of the game's asking price for this joke. Destiny 2's Curse of Osiris DLC. Wait, didn't we just do that? No, it's one nomination for each individual instance. When I feel like it, of course, because if that rule was absolute, Eververse would have 4 nominations. Curse of Osiris locks any player who didn't buy it out of the Prestige Raid and the Prestige Nightfall. The game already had a dead endgame, so Bungie's response was to literally remove the entire thing and put it behind a paywall. Oh, and also Heroic Strikes, a feature we had from day one in the first game, are behind that paywall too. This shit writes itself. Destiny 2. No, I'm not taking the piss. Throttling XP gains without telling its player base. So basically, with each level you get a bright engram, which is code for loot box. If you want exotic sparrows, ships, emotes, ornaments, RNG boosters, and a whole lot more, you need those loot boxes. Destiny 2 throttles XP gain if you do the same thing for too long, basically to a halt, which is of course so players who want loot boxes the most are coerced into buying them. In response to the outrage, Bungie decided to double the XP requirements to get a free bright engram. Either Activision has Bungie's throat firmly gripped, or Bungie simply doesn't give a shit anymore. 10 nominations, Jesus fucking Christ. And the award goes to Need for Speed Payback. No other game in history went as far as Payback did to sell loot crates, and I honestly don't think any other game ever will. The award also goes to Shadow of War. Thanks Warner Brothers for ruining one of the best games of the year. Shadow of War was an excellent game, but nobody even remembers that it came out thanks to that orc merchant bastard. That's the one that makes me genuinely sick. On that note, the award also goes to Destiny 2. Yeah, I had 3 trophies manufactured. Believe it or not, it's quite cheap to tie a piece of dog shit to a stick and carve the word wanker into it. Destiny 2 had 5 nominations, but it could have had 30. Let's move on to something nowhere near as dangerous, but equally as scary. Best Horror Game. Nominations are Doki Doki Literature Club, Just Doki Doki Literature Club, Just Doki Doki Literature Club, and the award goes to Doki Doki Literature Club. This year's had some pretty competent horror titles, but without a shadow of a doubt, Doki Doki takes the cake. I'm not going to spoil it because it's free, which means you have no excuse not to download it and play it after this video. Just don't let the cutesy visuals fool you. This is one of the most creative and well-written horror games I've ever seen. Oh, and also maybe save it for after the holiday. I wish I'd seen more of Resident Evil 7 this year because it does seem more scary, but Doki Doki's creativity absolutely needs to be acknowledged. Next up is my personal favorite category. The Coolest, Most Badass Game of the Year award. This goes to the game that had the most intense firefights, the most incredible explosions and high-octane moments. This is all about how much a game can get your blood pumping, and 2017 sure had its gems in this regard. First nomination goes to Ghost Recon Wildlands. I bet the vast majority of people forgot about this game, and that really is a shame. Wildlands was unique in its design, and it pulled it off exceptionally well. A huge open-ended game. The best way to describe it would be Metal Gear Solid 5, but with slightly watered down stealth mechanics and the scale turned up to 11 million. Screwing up a stealth encounter in this game won't mean resetting. It won't mean you have to sit on your ass waiting for the alarms to reset. It'll mean zipping over to the nearest car and dashing after the target, who's more than likely hauling ass already. It'll throw a small army at you if it wants to, and when you use your gun skills, stealth, and planning to best them anyway, it can give you a high like no tactical shooter has ever done before. I can't describe how fun it was to be trapped in a building with my teammates down as I crawled my way up a staircase to avoid a never-ending barrage of bullets coming in from the window. This game could create action set pieces better than any other game without scripting a thing. It's awesome. Up next is Shadow of War. This game took Shadow of Mordor and did the same thing as Wildlands. Turned up the scale as high as it could. Fortress battles in this game are utterly incredible. Your army versus theirs. It's a real shame some of the best sieges come from the online mode. And it's not just the size of the battles that make it so good, it's your very own abilities. You can chain executions, beat people into the floor, use a giant glaive like a lightsaber, ride a dragon with total control, then dive off it and talon strike into the ground. You can shadow strike every type of enemy in every circumstance, including fly kicking an enemy off their Caragor and booting an orc off a ladder to shoot them in the face while in midair. Did I mention you can go into slow motion while flying and make Legolas look like a kid with a slingshot? And you can do the same thing while sliding? The game makes you into a tier 10 god and it's glorious, but all of that is only made better by the story itself. Celebrimbor's arena and victory speeches are some of the most badass lines ever uttered in a video game. Alistair Duncan is truly one of the best voice actors out there. Battlefield 1. This one came out in 2016, yeah, but all the maps have come out this year and I would wager most of its playtime was logged in 2017. The game's still very much alive and kicking thanks to its addicting chaos of a multiplayer. There's nothing quite like the explosions in this game, especially the spectacle of the collapsing airship. While the power fantasy might not be there, and there's sure as hell not a shred of competitive play in the game, the chaos is like nothing else. This award was incredibly hard to choose. It came down to Shadow of War and Wildlands. I had to cut Battlefield 1 because while there are more explosions and incredible battles than any other FPS game out there, it does that at the sacrifice of pretty much every competitive element. Every time you die, the chance that you could have predicted or responded to it is shockingly low. While you can be extremely good at the game, you need to play a sniper to do so, at least on console that is. I played 330 games of Battlefield 1. My overall KD is 1.55. Now it's closer to 2.8. After all those games, I'm very rarely outside of the top 10 places on the scoreboard. I'm not very good, but I've played enough that I should have some effect on the outcome of games, right? You want to know what my win percent is? 49. 49%. My friend's win percent is 48. That right there is statistical evidence that you as a player have no control whatsoever over the outcome of games. It's cool, but not very fair. Moving on to the last two. While I think the moment-to-moment action of Shadow of War is cooler on paper, Wildlands manages to do it 100% unscripted, unaided by fancy animations and relying on strong game mechanics alone. I can't even count the number of experiences I had in Wildlands that I will never forget. Shadow of War is more consistently badass, it just never reaches the heights of Ghost Recon. So congrats Ubisoft. I do have scripts mostly written on both games. Let's go on to the most ridiculous thing that happened in the game industry this year award. Xenoblade 2's character designs. Let's not worry about the rest of the over-designed anime bollocks and zoom in a bit on that. What in the name of fuck is this? Why has she got a binary star system strapped to her chest? I mean, seriously, is her contribution to the team deflecting incoming asteroids? I just want to know why. Who thought this was a good idea? Is anyone really attracted by this? She looks like her spine is so bent that it spells out the Greek alphabet. Skyrim getting re-released 2 fucking times for insane premiums in the span of 1 year after being re-released the previous year anyway, and somehow not managing to fix a single one of the game-breaking bugs that's been plaguing the game for over 6 fucking years. Honestly, Skyrim on Switch was a good idea. Who doesn't want Skyrim on the go? But I'll tell you what people do want. An actual fucking game from Bethesda, preferably one that isn't largely considered a disappointment. Every E3 for the past 3 years I've tuned into Bethesda's show just to see if they'll announce Elder Scrolls 6. The exact same effect happened with Rockstar 2. We used to have a great game every year from them, and since GTA 5 it's been microtransactions or re-releases. Yet another reason I don't want to buy the PS5 or Xbox Extra XX Xbox X. EA causing a microtransaction crash by going so far with in-game gambling that they actually got governments involved. It almost felt like a revolution. EA went too far. They didn't play it smart or safe as Activision does. They didn't try anything insidious or subtly manipulative. They never intended their system as a form of conditioning. They went in as hard and as loud as they possibly could because they just couldn't wait. They couldn't play it close to the chest as their competitors do. And finally, the torches and pitchforks actually got something done. Activision pouring about $1 billion into Destiny, making an embarrassing mess, and then getting beaten out by a free-to-play Space Ninja game. Warframe's victory was 2017. It's more popular now than ever thanks to DE's ability to make their game into whatever it needs to be. This year it needed to be a big, beautiful open world game to compete with Destiny 2. Seemingly totally out of Warframe's ballpark, but DE swung and they hit it hard. My opinion's out on Plains of Eidolons, but its effect is undeniable. Warframe is now a household name, not only due to DE's intelligence and ability, but also because so many Destiny fans quit after the disaster delivered to us at launch. Mass Effect Andromeda's animations. How? Well, half the blame goes over to the development of Andromeda, and the other half goes to EA forcing every game they have to use Frostbite. This game is just depressing. PUBG's Xbox One optimization. It's not even the console. How can a game that looks like it could have been released 5 years ago run this poorly? How do you achieve that? This isn't just an Xbox issue. People with GTX 1080s are having trouble with this game's frame rate. It's slapstick, as Crobecat shows. Warframe losing the ongoing game award to Overwatch. I don't know if the judges were high or bought off, but there's something fishy going on when a game that's reinvented itself from the ground up multiple times since launch loses out to a game that's released what, 4 new characters and a couple of new maps? Even if we restrict everything to the year of 2017, Warframe wins by an even bigger margin. Going open world, introducing a whole new style of play along with a cinematic questline and implementing a new mod system somehow loses to 2 new playable characters and a handful of maps. In what universe? The award goes to Skyrim. It's not that it got re-released for full price, it's because good developers that were once considered legendary who put out genre-defining games annually now rely on microtransactions and re-releases instead of actually developing video games. I want Rockstar and Bethesda back. Moving on to most anticipated game. Darksiders 3. When Darksiders 3 was announced this year, I almost died from a heart attack. Darksiders 2 is my second favourite game of all time, and Death is my favourite protagonist of anything ever. I adore these games in the Darksiders universe. Sadly, not long after Darksiders 2's launch, THQ was shut down and Vigil Games along with it. The remnants spread all over the place, mostly to Crytek, but eventually they decided to get back together, go independent, and start working on Darksiders 3. And I couldn't be happier. Fury looks incredible, the art and graphics are top notch once again, the combat looks like a blast. I am optimistic and I can't wait to get my hands on it, hoping for a late 2018 release. Spider-Man PS4. Iron Man is my favourite superhero, followed closely by Batman, but Spider-Man's always been up there too, and that's less down to his on-screen portrayals but rather his video games. Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man are of course classics, but Web of Shadows is not only my favourite Spider-Man game, but also one of my favourite games ever. The combat, the collectibles, the story, and above all of those, the atmosphere. There's nothing like swinging through a bustling New York with the sun's yellow gaze beaming off the windows of skyscrapers and offices. After Web of Shadows, we had Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time. I really liked the first, but not really the second. Not one of them had that New York superhero Spider-Man feel. Then The Amazing Spider-Man comes along. A movie tie-in. Must be awful then, right? Not quite. I actually really liked the first Amazing Spider-Man. I loved the story, but most of all, the large-scale combat which no other Spider-Man game has done since. You would have to fight bosses bigger than skyscrapers in this city with no help at all. Eventually, you'd get chased by a mutant-seeking drone which would immerse you into high-speed, explosive, dynamic boss fights that had more spectacle than both of the movies combined. It was amazing. Sadly, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a bit crap, and since then it's been radio silence. Until now. Insomniac have shown off their new Spider-Man game with the most beautiful rendition of New York there's ever been. There's satisfying swinging, interesting combat, an intriguing story, and an awesome new suit. Spider-Man PS4 has me hooked. I couldn't be more hyped. Far Cry 5. I love Far Cry 4. I was actually going to do a video on it until I realized how large an undertaking that would be, and of course that nobody would watch it. Far Cry 4 was one of Ubisoft's best. Incredible dynamic combat, satisfying FPS mechanics, jaw-dropping graphics, and an awesome story created one of the best open-world gaming experiences that I'd ever had. They were straying from the survival aspect of the game and going all in on the action focus. Far Cry 5 seems to be taking that even further, and I can't wait to see what they do. The Crew 2. After my 2 videos on the Need for Speed series, I was about ready to give up on the racing genre. I'm not big into sim racing anymore, and I couldn't play Forza Horizon 3 thanks to its exclusivity. The Crew 2, however, looks like a blast. It's basically my only hope for the future of open world racing after the embarrassment that was Need for Speed Payback. Days Gone. This doesn't look like the proper zombie survival game I've been after since the dawn of time, but it has at least got the zombies right. There's a fuck ton of them, and you can use them to your advantage. It looks like a load of fun. There's dynamic events, what seems like really cool motorcycle handling, and incredible graphics. Let's just hope they don't make the game too easy, because that could totally destroy the horror element you'd get from being chased by a horde of 1,000 zombies. Sadly, next up is most disappointing game of the year. Destiny 2. God fucking damn it. After the constant shit Destiny got even after the Taken King, everyone in the community saw Destiny 2 as salvation. Finally, people would see what had us all addicted. Finally, the dumbass people still play this game comments would stop. You know what's happened now? Destiny's community is dead. Gone. Buried. There's a small skeleton crew of people who do still find the game fun, but the vast majority of the community is either gone or only playing the game because they have to. That took how long? 3 months? The first game's community lasted for 3 years. Destiny 2 has no endgame, a ridiculous token loot system, dumb, poorly written contradictory lore, a predatory microtransaction systems, bad loot, a bad raid, bad strikes, bad nightfalls, awful crucible, dumbed down gameplay, unbalanced subclasses, a depressingly bad weapon system, crap story, bad mission design, a hugely disappointing final boss, awful characters, only 2 good explorable spaces, 1 disappointment and 1 total failure, bad overpriced DLC, and the dumbest, most idiotic progression systems I've ever seen from a looter shooter. Destiny 2 was going to be my game of the year. It was going to be Destiny's salvation. Instead, it's a bullet in the head and Destiny's cremation. Mass Effect Andromeda. I forgot this game even existed until it came out on Origin Access. God, I wish it hadn't. Andromeda is saddening. We were going to a totally new galaxy. Imagine all the things BioWare could dream up, all the forms of life, all the technology. What do we get? Humanoid, insect-looking dickheads who have human-like intelligence, use human-like technology and weaponry, and have human-like motivations. Fucking brilliant. There's also an ancient alien race who've disappeared but left their technology behind, which is of course sleek-looking block structures with energy flowing through them, because that's never been done before. You had a new fucking galaxy, you could have dreamt up anything, and you gave us the most boring, generic crap imaginable, along with the most embarrassing dialogue and animations I've ever witnessed. Fuck's sake, BioWare. Need for Speed Payback. I told everyone to be optimistic at the end of my Need for Speed series retrospective. What a fucking joker they must think of me now. Payback had a good story, fun off-roading, competent graphics, I'll give it that. It also had dumbed-down car customization, a tiny map, bad tuning, an awful car class system, mediocre handling, no sense of speed, a bad multiplayer, and of course the most predatory, most disgusting implementation of microtransactions I do believe there's ever been. Let's play a game of Guess the Publisher. Yeah. Payback wasn't without its merits, but it sure as shit is without my respect. Goodbye, Need for Speed. Battlefront 2. I just wanted a fun little multiplayer game to play over Christmas. Last year it was Battlefield 1, and there wasn't going to be another Battlefield until the next year, so Battlefront 2 was where I was looking. Free maps and lots of them, a proper campaign, cool new gameplay. It had it all. EA Battlefront's redemption. No. You see, Battlefront 2 had one problem. EA. To no one's shock, the award goes to Destiny 2. I don't know if there'll be a Destiny 3, and after Destiny 2, I don't care. The next one is a very conditional category. The award 2. This time, it's personal. It's all about sequels. First nomination is Titanfall 2. Titanfall, the original one, had a really fucking great multiplayer, but it also had an unfair price tag, exclusivity, boring graphics, and no campaign. It was forgotten about. Then Titanfall 2 comes along and systematically fixes every single one of the first game's flaws. No campaign? We made the best FPS campaign in years. Boring graphics. We froze an explosion in time. Exclusivity? Not anymore. The only thing that regressed in my eyes is multiplayer balancing, but the multiplayer is still one of the best around, with free DLC, cool maps, fun progression, and the incredible interplay between Titan and Pilot. Titanfall 2 is still the cream of the crop. Shame the release schedule, lack of marketing, and consumers put it to death. Titanfall 2 was less of a redemption, more of a victory. Watch Dogs 2, however, was both. Watch Dogs 1 is probably now remembered as awful, but even at the peak of the outrage, few people thought it was bad. It just wasn't very good, as promised. In fact, almost nothing had came out as Ubisoft had shown. It's sad because at least the graphics wouldn't have had to take that hit if it weren't for how dogmatic the industry is about keeping console and PC experiences as close as possible. Regardless, the game was looked back on as one of the greatest gaming letdowns of all time, and this was in the same year as vanilla Destiny, so Watch Dogs 2 had some fucking work to do. And by God, did it deliver. Everything from the city to the clothes options was overhauled. Stealth, story, hacking, graphics, driving, skills, everything. The only regressions made were maturity and gunplay in my opinion. Otherwise, Watch Dogs 2 is an incredible example of a sequel done right. It didn't sell well, to no one's surprise, and that genuinely is a shame. I have not only hope, but genuine excitement for Watch Dogs 3, and I will be covering 2 in an upcoming video. Shadow of War. Fuck, I've already explained how upset I am at this game for being overlooked, but addressing it as a sequel alone, Shadow of War is a masterpiece. Bad story last game? Good story this game. Bad boss fights last game? Pretty good boss fights this game. Excellent nemesis system. Hugely expanded, even more excellent nemesis system. Small-scale battles even in strongholds. Assaulting fortresses and fighting entire armies. Ridiculously easy endgame to the point that all replay value disappears and content creators have to let themselves die because it's the only way they can ever lose. Well, this time there's a difficulty slider, thank God. The list goes on. Skill trees, level design, graphics, beasts, animation quality. I can't name a single aspect of the game I truly believe is worse than Shadow of Mordor aside from those goddamn fucking loot boxes and the true ending crap. The award goes to Titanfall 2. Watch Dogs could have had it, but Titanfall went from no campaign to setting an example to all FPS developers out there. Its campaign isn't just good, it's genre-defining. Among giants like Halo, Modern Warfare, and Doom. Above them in places. I have a video on it if you'd like to hear more, but given its price and given the time of year, it's probably best you play it yourself. Buy it. So now it's time for the Game of the Year. I'd have said here and now that the award goes to Titanfall 2, but I'm not going to stretch my rule over to the most important award. I bloody wish I'd have played any actual games that came out this year. Persona, Nier, Hollow Knight, Zelda, Mario. Nope, I played Destiny fucking 2 and Need for Speed. I'm glad I never actually paid for this shit so the title wouldn't feel like a stab in the gut payback. The nominations are as follows. Doki Doki Literature Club. This was a 5-hour mindfuck. I say mindfuck, it wasn't exactly Antichamber, and its horror elements weren't exactly the Blair Witch Project. But I appreciate smart writing and creative ideas. Doki Doki built up tension and suspense masterfully if you didn't have it spoiled for you, which you better believe I'm not going to do. Ghost Recon Wildlands is unique. Its action is unparalleled, its mission structure and progression systems allowed for Breath of the Wild levels of freedom. It's actually difficult, its stealth systems are more than competent, and its customizer's fun. For a game this big, having the odd problem isn't a surprise, but there's so much content and it can be so much fun to do that I ended up addicted to it for about 2 months straight. I still haven't finished it. A video will be coming out eventually. Shadow of War. Oh, I was excited for this. I was dying for this. I watched the entire game movie on night of release because I'm impatient as hell, got my hands on it, recorded about 3 hours of clips and wrote about 12,000 words of notes on it. This game is deep, interesting, incredibly fun, badass, and if you can ignore the fucking loot crates and bugs, it can become something utterly incredible. Probably the most important change was that difficulty slider though. Putting the game on Nemesis means once in a while you might actually find yourself outmatched, whereas in the last game if you died past a certain point there was a 99% guarantee you were either drunk, asleep, high, or mentally ill. Some shred of difficulty allows the game's Nemesis system to flourish, and when it can, all those stories you were told about the relationships between orcs and the player become true. It's an experience, and I expected no less from Monolith. Dark Souls 3 The Fire Fades Edition. My channel begins on a series end. I played through the bulk of this game last year, but it was released along with Ashes of Ariandel and The Ring City in spring of this year. My feelings are still washy on parts of the base game, but over-reliance on swamps, too much brown, and a few uninteresting levels aren't enough to bring down the game with some of the most incredible art, fun gameplay, and awesome boss fights I've ever witnessed. Sister Fried is actually my favourite boss fight in anything, basically ever. The game was worth the price then, but with The Ring City giving the game its beautiful conclusion, the Fire Fades Edition is something I can recommend to anyone who likes hard games. I do still have that video on The Ring City if you're interested. From my limited selection, my game of the year is Shadow of War. It had malicious loot boxes, a really poor ending, and enough bugs to fill a fucking rainforest, but it was so much fun that none of that really matters in the end. Despite it not having infinite offline sieges, which is a crime against humanity, it's endlessly replayable thanks to its Nemesis system, and with the sieges and the skills, it's also endlessly badass. Special thanks above all of that goes out to Crysis. All of them. I spent the majority of my year playing these games, and I gained the majority of my traction thanks to them too. Crysis 1 was a gem, Crysis Warhead was truly great, Crysis 2 was an underloved problem, and Crysis 3 was the bittersweet conclusion. For my 2017, Crysis is the game of the year, along with Warhead as the expansion pack. It's a tactical playground with potential for some of the most gripping action around. Perhaps Fear will be what defines my channel next year as I start covering that. It's gonna be fun. I've got so many projects open that I wouldn't even know where to begin. 2018 is gonna be a good year for this channel, and I hope it's a great year for everyone watching too. On that closing note, I'm off to upload my Why Warframe is the worst game ever made video, so stay tuned.